So good morning. We're talking about Amos this morning. This is a prophet in the Hebrew Bible. He's a shepherd. Has his flock on the side of the hill, quite a bit up and away from the city. And he is a holy man, and seems to be more attuned to the presence of God, but only because he sits and meditates on the side of the hill. And he sees a vision of what's going on in the world. And now he's a simple man, and he feels in harmony, but he does get worked up over this meditation that he has, and he sees the people in the city that are not being cared for. And he gets worked up about a couple other things. The news of the day, there are 4 betrayals that have happened. And he says in his prophecy, he says that the people will be punished. There will be a punishment that comes from these 4 betrayals. And it's pretty gruesome, really, some of these betrayals. And but he says a punishment is coming. Now, what he's talking about, in the Hebrew Bible, there's a lot of this sinning and punishment that occurs then afterwards. But if we think about it in terms of just cause and effect, right? You could think about it as karma, if you like, but cause and effect. You do something, and then something else happens as a result. Well, there's consequences then. That's what it means, really. There's consequences to these things. And those are going to come. Now, the way it's stated in the book is that God's going to punish the people for these betrayals. And the particular betrayals, that's not really what I want to talk about today, because he has a larger vision that occurs that I think is more important and really more germane to what's actually going on in our own society today. So if you think about the times, these are probably the most prosperous times that the Hebrew people have ever experienced. They're strong in military. They're strong in commerce. Prosperity is just flowing abundantly to some of the people. But many of the people are suffering. Now, this is nothing new. Even in these times, this is an old story. This is what's going on. But some of us are always, Jesus said this, he says, the poor will always be with you. And some of us will continue to live outside of abundance for reasons that we really can't figure out. Really not clear to us why we do this. But some of those that are suffering should not be ignored. This is the key to it. He looks down on the valley and he sees what he calls the invisible people. That he sees these folks that people are just ignoring them. And it's a strong condition of the time, and it's actually a very present condition in our time. It's happening every day in every city across this country, and even, around the world for that matter. The poor and the needy are invisible. People want to ignore them. But what Amos prophesizes is he says all this material stuff that you have will be of no value if just getting that material stuff is your focus in life. And eventually, it will dissipate. When it's actually what happened. Historically, it's actually what happened. Then there's a king who just is totally, he doesn't even want to hear this story, right? He doesn't want to hear the story at all. And then he has a priest who, of course, he sees the writing on the wall, and he goes right along with the king, and he denounces Amos for coming down off his hill and given these prophecies in the middle of the city. Well, they represent government, of course, and religion not paying attention to alleviating and healing need. So this is the story. This is the story. And we were in San Francisco last week, and man, there's a bunch of invisible people. A lot. A lot. And if you watch what's going on, they are ignored. People do everything they can not to see them. It's like they've got this ability to totally look through them. And we were talking on the way back that if you go to a city like this, it would be like a really good idea if you just took $100 of the money that you have to spend and put it into $5 bills. That'd be 20 people that you could give a $5 bill to, right? There's more than that, by the way. But still, and if you have more, you can do more. But not just to give them the money, but to actually make a connection, to say something, to make eye contact, to actually see that they're there, right? Now, this is just a small thing to do, but I think it's really important. The problem is sometimes if you like give people more than that, which I've done in the past, but it could be a negative occurrence in their life if they actually get more money than that all at once. It could be a big health challenge, depending. But to see them, to actually see them, rather than just ignore them. Now, some people give them money, but won't look at them, right? And just go on. Just get the heck out of there as quick as they can. Well, what Amos said was, these people are your brothers and sisters, and you are ignoring them. You're trying to ignore them. You really know that they're there. In the back of your mind, you know that they're there. And there are consequences to pay for this. Well, I'm just thinking that when we're doing the meditation, the reason I wrote it like that was to make this point that to not ignore. If many of us here, I mean, we've got a whole just sitting in this room, we all have a different level of means that we could share with others out of our own pocket. I mean, it's different, right? But the most important thing is not what we share out of our own pocket, although that would be good for us. But the most important thing is to say, these folks are suffering and there's no need for it. And sometimes, you know what, I mean, many of us here maybe have experienced the actual suffering of it. But to say, as citizens, our brothers and sisters are suffering and it doesn't have to be this way. Because really, if we look at what's going on, look at the stock market. The stock market is indicative of the prosperity that's in the country. But what has happened is there's this huge imbalance that has occurred, where a small amount control much more percentage-wise than really almost any time in history. Certainly any time in history of our country. And so these are the kind of things that we need to notice and just speak up and say, this isn't okay. How can we move in a direction as a country where we can begin to alleviate the suffering? Now again, as Jesus said, the poor will always be with you. So there are going to be some who are always going to be in that condition. I'm not going to speculate as to why. I have my own ideas about it. I actually think we may choose those kinds of situations for ourselves, for our own lesson for the lifetime. But the piece of it is that for each and every one of us is to say, yes, my brother may have chosen this for a lesson, but I'm not sure what the lesson is, and I know that my own lesson is I'm supposed to be helping. To try to help appropriately, right? So Amos is telling the people, wake up, wake up. You've got the suffering going on in your city, and all the stuff that you pile up in your safes, in your bank accounts. Of course, they probably didn't have bank accounts then, but they had some way of saving up money, saving up things. There's not going to mean anything to you if you don't turn your attention to these invisible people. And so I was thinking about this. I was saying, well, this is what's going on now. So what do we do? Well, the first and the most basic thing that we do is we pray. We pray in the way that Amos did. And see, when he first begins his meditation, he is quite calm and at peace. And it's just as he lets his attention flow down into the city that he sees this apparent disharmony. Well, in our prayers, we can see that disharmony is really manufactured by us. I mean, we really are, and again, I'm presenting my opinion, but we're in a conspiracy with each other to keep these kind of conditions going. Because what it does is it keeps giving us the message, the world is a dangerous place. We better get everything that we can, otherwise we'll end up like this person on the street. I mean, I probably told the story. I had a woman who worked for me, was the most talented salesperson I ever had working for me. She actually made more money. I was the vice president of the company. She was on commission. She made more money than me. She made more money than the president of the company every year. Because that's how we had it structured. If you do the work, you get paid. Well, she had this fear that she shared with me, that she thought, she kept having dreams about herself being a bag lady on the street. Now this is what we, and I don't think that she was, I think that we all have fears that are similar to that, only maybe not to that extreme. So the meditation, the prayer and the meditation is to say, this is not real. We live in an abundant universe, and what we have created here is artificial lack. And so we have some people who are living in this artificial lack, and we have some people who are living in this great prosperity, but they're scared too. They're scared they're going to lose what they have. And so everybody's protecting their little piece of the pie. So in our prayers and meditation, we see that this is an artificial condition, and that really we are all in harmony with God, and that prosperity is flowing to us, and that the only reason that we're not experiencing it, because and at different times in life, we are experiencing, each and every one of us, different degrees of prosperity. The only reason we're not experiencing more is because of our own level of acceptance, our own level of what we, a lot of times what we think we deserve, what we think we have. So it's our own mental blocks that keep us from experiencing this prosperity. And I want to just say that when I talk about prosperity, I always want to define it as an abundance of all good things. So it doesn't just mean the stuff that comes to us, it doesn't just mean the material things. And really, the material things need to be like just an added benefit. Prosperity, abundance of all good things, means that I'm at peace, that I'm in love, that I'm actually in love with life. This is really prosperity. Because that means that I'm not living in fear. When I'm living in love with life, I'm not living in fear of life and in fear of what might happen next. And so our own individual journey down this path to abundance and prosperity is that we start releasing our fears. We start giving our worries away. It was interesting. Scott and I went to a meeting, and there were a number of people complaining about different situations and relationships. Oh, those relationships are so painful. And there was a lot of whining and even some crying and carrying on. And yes, now listen, when somebody starts crying, they're upset, right? And you get this feeling, you have a little bit of compassion comes up because you know how that feels. But also, if you're observing, you're also seeing that there's a whole bunch of this that's just self-centeredness. There's a whole bunch of the suffering that's actually volunteer suffering. And so we have this beautiful thing called surrender. And surrender means not having to fight anymore. Right? So, but also what we talk about here is that when I have a problem, an issue, a relationship that seems to be in trouble, a loved one who is ill, some financial disaster that's occurring, that how surrender works is we don't just resign ourselves to it and say, oh, well, he's sick, he's probably going to die. Well, that's not surrender. Surrender is saying, of myself, I can't do anything with this problem. By myself, I can't do anything to it. So let me give it to God. Let me give it to Spirit. So this is a proper surrender. So any issues that I see in my life that are just for this morning, we talk about around prosperity, let me give my worries to Spirit. And to realize that God actually looks at this surrender that we've just made. It may look really ugly to us. The situation may look horrible, it's awful, right? Why would God want something that looked this awful? God sees it as this wonderful gift that we have in trust given our issue on the altar. We have given it as a gift. It is, you could say that it is our modern day sacrifice. And this is what we want to sacrifice, is all those things that really are a problem for us. Rather than, as it used to be thought, that you wanted to sacrifice, you would have to sacrifice something really good, and that makes you a good person. If you sacrifice something really good, you're a good person. I'm saying sacrifice the bad stuff. Give all the ugly stuff. Surrender all of the problems. And so thinking about this in context with all of the folks who are suffering is to say, let me realize that when I see this person, what's really going on? Why don't I want to see the person really? Why do I want to ignore them? Why do I want to act like they're really not even there? It's fear. It's all, I mean, and the fears, they are, I mean, specifically, they're probably all over the board depending on our own makeup, right? But there's some fear in us about this person. And some people say, no, I'm just disgusted. That's fear. Some people would say, I wish they'd just go out and get a job. Well, give them a job. Help them get a job, right? So, and yeah, I know some of these guys are not in very good shape. I mean, if you gave them a job tomorrow, they probably wouldn't be able to perform very well. But as a society coming together and saying we've got to come up with a plan to do something about this. This is our so first of all, we pray and we meditate and we see that it's not real anyway, that we've like manufactured this, that really there's abundance for everybody, there's plenty, and that we've manufactured this. But then from that meditation of seeing that, there are going to be certain actual actions that we have to take. So one of the actions would be to say something about it. What do we want to have this going on for? Let's do something. Let's have a dialogue about what to do with this situation. And then to start moving and I mean, there's all sorts of things we can do. The education system needs to be revamped anyway. We need to do something, to actually do something in the world based on compassion and love, not based on fear. And the only reason we don't is because we're afraid there's not enough to do it. There's just a general feeling that there's not enough. There's plenty. There's plenty. There's plenty to take care of everyone. We know that. I mean, there's smart people out there. There's smart people out there that have already figured out the solutions to all these things. We're not listening. So all I'm suggesting today, I'm not suggesting that you go on a crusade, because that may not be your calling. And I'm not suggesting that if you don't go on some kind of crusade that you don't care about people. What I'm suggesting is be like Amos and at least speak up and say something, and then allow Spirit within to guide you in whatever action seems appropriate to take. Well, this is the lesson that we give all the time, right? For each person that comes in front of you, there's an appropriate gift that you have to give. Sometimes it's $5. Sometimes it's just acknowledgement. Just noticing that there is another person in front of you. Sometimes it's the surrender when you say, man, this problem is too big. To understand, listen, this problem is too big for any one of us to deal with. And so we surrender the problem to God. And this is a very interesting dynamic that when we start to get in the practice of doing this, we find out that every one of those things that we surrender, every one of those problems that we surrender, the next day, maybe in the next minute even, a solution comes back to us from Spirit, something that we're supposed to do. After we give it away, after we give the problem as a gift to God, the solution comes back to us as to what we were supposed to do. And then, of course, it's time for us to act, to actually do something. So just think about this. If you just took this idea of just taking the $100 and making it into fives, and you always had it in your pocket. You always had this $100, you had $100 in fives in your pocket. Now that's not your money to spend. You got another pocket over here where you have some other money to spend. But you've got this